Hello, friends, and thank you for allowing me to be part of your personal growth today. Today, we're going to talk about courageous conversations, those moments when leadership requires us to choose courage over comfort. Leadership isn't tested in those easy moments, it's tested when something needs to be said and we're unsure on how the other person will receive it. I've been in leadership roles for most of my life, long before I ever had a title. And I want to start by telling you a little bit about my leadership journey. In second grade, my teacher asked my parents what kind of leader they wanted me to be. I went to a very small rural school, and honestly, I think I was a bit of a bully, not in the best way. My parents didn't tell me about that conversation or ask me about my behavior. Growing up on a dairy farm, they decided at that point in second grade, I would have to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning with the rest of my siblings to do chores. And when I got home at the end of the day, chores were the first things to do. And it was a turning point for me. From there, I poured myself into 4 H, cheerleading, student council, always volunteering, always stepping up. Leadership came naturally to me. Yet, when I was asked during an interview question as a senior in high school what type of leader I was, I hesitated because to me, leadership was those popular kids, those who everybody wanted to be around. As I reflected on that question, I said, I lead by example. And that became my pattern. Professionally, I advanced quickly, offered management roles easily, trusted with responsibility, and eventually became a library director. With every new role, my teams grew and my work shifted from tasks to people. And by most measures, I was successful. And for about 95% of that time, I was successful. I truly was. I showed up as a strong leader. I motivated, coached, influenced, and advocated. I handled hard things every day. But there was this other 5%. The 5% showed up when I avoided hard conversations, when I chose comfort over clarity, when I tried to keep the peace instead of holding someone accountable. Does this sound like you? There's that 5% that you aren't always the best that you can be. Not because I didn't care, because I cared too much about being liked, about not rocking the boat, about not making someone uncomfortable. The 5% cost me energy, it created stress, and it quietly impacted the people I was meant to lead. What I eventually realized is this: avoiding courageous conversations isn't kindness, it's self protection. I wasn't sparing others' feelings, I was protecting my own. Today isn't about fixing that 95%. You already handle hard things every day. You are leaders, problem solvers, advocates, often for everybody else. Today is about strengthening that 5%. So let me ask you something, and you don't need to answer out loud. What conversation are you avoiding right now? It might be at work, it might be at home, it might be advocating for yourself in a situation where you've been staying quiet. And second question, what is the cost of not having that conversation? While you're thinking about that, let me introduce you to three people from my own leadership journey, because I've been right where you are. Employee A. On the surface, she was using every bit of her sick leave from the moment it was earned, scheduling full days off for single appointments, always on the days that inconvenienced her fellow staff. Her colleagues were frustrated. I was concerned, but I didn't yet know what was really going on. There's employee B. She had some of the best customer service skills I've ever seen. Yet she was arriving late. She was leaving early. She was adjusting her schedule without letting anyone else know. I had the conversation. I made the accommodations, and it still didn't resolve things the way I'd hoped. And employee C. She was a talented staff member who had developed a habit of correcting her colleagues, even though that wasn't her role. I spoke with her about it multiple times, but I never truly held her accountable. I told myself I was being kind. I was actually protecting myself. I'm going to come back to each of these conversations as we move through today's content. because their stories illustrate every step of what we're about to cover. And I'll tell you how each situation ended before we're done today. For now, hold on to that conversation in your mind. We're going to give you the tools to have it, because courageous conversations just don't happen in boardrooms. They happen in kitchens, doctor's offices, classrooms, and sometimes at the checkout counter when something isn't quite right. Leadership communication skills impact every relationship. Leadership doesn't stop with your job title. And courage is not something you either have or you don't have. It's something you practice. I encourage you to download the Courageous Conversation Toolkit. We'll give you the link there here at the end. There's a page in there designed for exactly this moment. You can use it to capture the conversation you're thinking about and work through it step by step. Over the years, I've realized courageous conversations, don't happen by accident. They follow a simple pattern. I call it the Courageous Conversations model. It has 3 steps. Step 1, awareness. Step 2, background. Step 3, action. We'll walk through each one, but first, I want to give you a tool that'll make every single step more effective. Before we walk through the model, I want to give you a framework that will make every step easier, especially when conversations get uncomfortable. Some of you may already be familiar with DISC. For those who aren't, here's a quick foundation. DISC is a behavioral assessment framework that describes 4 primary communication and work styles. It's not about labeling people or putting them in a box. It's about understanding patterns, how people tend to think, communicate, and respond, especially under pressure. 4 styles are D, dominant. These people are direct, results focused, decisive. These styles move fast and want to get to the bottom line. I style, influencing, enthusiastic, relationship focused, expressive. I styles light up a room and lead with connection. S, steadiness. These people are patient, loyal, supportive. S styles are the stabilizers. They value harmony and consistency above almost everything else. And C, compliant. These are analytical people, detail-oriented, precise. These styles want accuracy and need time to process before they respond. Do you see yourself in one of these styles? Most of us have a primary style and a secondary style. And here's what's most important to understand. No style is better than another. Each one brings genuine strengths. Each one has predictable blind spots. And each one shows up very differently when a conversation gets hard. Think of your DISC style as your default setting, the version of yourself that shows up automatically, especially when you're not thinking about it. In calm, easy moments, your style works well. You communicate, you connect, you get things done. But when a conversation gets uncomfortable, the default setting gets louder. The D, who's usually decisive, may become impatient, domineering, pushy. The I, who's usually warm, may start softening the message until the real point disappears. The S, who is usually steady, may go completely silent to keep the peace. The C, who's usually thorough, may hide behind data to avoid the emotional weight of the conversation. None of these are character flaws. They are predictable stress responses. And what's predictable is manageable once you see it. I'll tell you right now, I'm an S, and my greatest fear is confrontation. So when I talk about avoiding hard conversations, I'm not describing something I observed in other leaders. I'm describing myself. That 5% I mentioned earlier, for me, it showed up because every difficult conversation felt like a confrontation I needed to avoid. Knowing that about myself, truly seeing it, was the beginning of everything I'm sharing with you today. That's the first gift that DISC gives you, self-awareness. The second gift DISC gives you is a way to see the person across from you more clearly. When you're preparing for a courageous conversation, ask yourself, What do I know about this person? A D wants directness and clarity. Don't oversoften the message. Get to the point. An I needs to know the relationship is okay before they can hear the message. An S needs to feel safe. Silence from them doesn't mean agreement. A C needs specifics. They need facts, examples, a clear explanation of what needs to change. This doesn't mean changing your message or lowering your standards. The truth stays the same. What changes is how you deliver it, the pace, the tone, the structure. That's not people pleasing. That's communication intelligence. And it connects directly to everything we're about to cover. So now let's walk through that courageous conversation model. The first step in the courageous conversation is awareness, and it has 3 layers: awareness of yourself, awareness of the other person, and awareness of the moment. Awareness of yourself. This is where it starts with you. Before you can have a courageous conversation with anyone else, you need to know what's happening inside of you when discomfort shows up. Because here's what most of us do: we feel the discomfort and we immediately move away from it. We delay the conversation. We tell ourselves it's not the right time. We convince ourselves the other person isn't ready, when really we aren't ready. That's your default distress response, doing exactly what it's wired to do. So the first awareness question is simply this: what am I feeling right now? And what is it telling me? Don't judge the feeling. Don't push it away. Just acknowledge it. Because awareness creates a gap between the trigger and your response. And in that gap is where your choice lives. Employee C is a perfect example of this. Each time I sat down to have a direct accountability conversation with her, I could feel my own discomfort rising. My instinct was to soften it, redirect, and find a way to address the behavior without making her feel called out. What I didn't recognize in those moments was that I was the one avoiding, not her. My disc dial was running the show. And awareness of that pattern, I didn't have it yet. Once you've looked inward, turn your attention outward. Awareness of the other person doesn't mean assuming you know how they'll react. It means approaching them with curiosity instead of certainty. Think about their disc style. Think about what they might need in order to actually hear you. Do they need directness, reassurance that the relationship is safe, specific facts instead of generalizations? Even asking that question shifts you from I know how this will go to I know how I'm going to open this conversation. That shift alone changes the energy that you bring into the room. Talk about awareness of the moment. That's the third layer of awareness. It's situational, reading the moment itself before and during the conversation. Is this the right time? Is this the right setting? Is this person in a place where they can actually hear me? Timing matters more than most people realize. Conversation that could take place on a Tuesday morning can go completely sideways on a Friday afternoon when someone is stressed or depleted. That's not avoidance, that's wisdom. It also means staying aware during the conversation. Notice when the energy shifts, when someone goes quiet or defensive. Notice when your own response starts to kick in. Strong emotions aren't a sign that things are going wrong. They're a sign that something important is at stake. Awareness creates choice. Here's the line across all these layers. Awareness doesn't resolve the conversation, but it gives you choice. Without awareness, you're an autopilot, reacting from habit, from fear, from your default disc response. The conversation runs you. With awareness, you have a moment, sometimes just a breath, to decide who you want to be in this conversation. Consider that courageous conversation that we spoke about at the beginning of the session. Ask yourself, what am I feeling when I think about that conversation? Which part of my disc style is showing up? And what would be the right time and the setting look like to have that conversation? Write that down and think about it later. Awareness tells you what's happening inside you and around you. Now, background is going to answer a different question entirely. What do I actually know? And what story am I telling myself? The distinction is one of the most important things I can share with you today because the gap between facts and stories is where most courageous conversations break down before they ever begin. A fact is observable, something you could capture on video, something another person in the room would also see or hear. A story is the meaning that you attach to the fact, the interpretation, the assumption, the conclusion you've drawn, often without realizing you've drawn it. Consider these examples. She hasn't responded to my 3 emails. That's a fact. She's avoiding me because she's upset about what I said in the meeting. That's a story. Both feel equally real, but only one of them is something you can actually use. When we walk into a courageous conversation leading with the story, the other person feels it. They get defensive, not because the issue isn't real, but because they're responding to a judgment that they may not have earned yet. When we lead with facts, we create space. We open a door instead of closing one. Page 5 of the toolkit has a facts and stories table where you can do exactly this work for your own conversation. Write down what you're actually observed on one side and what you've been telling yourself on the other. It's a very clarifying exercise to complete. As you're considering background, think of it as an iceberg. Above the surface is behavior, what you can see. Someone missing deadlines, someone going quiet in meetings, someone seeming disengaged or short-tempered. Below the surface is everything else. Stress that they haven't mentioned, family situation that you don't know about, a fear of failure they've never voiced, a misunderstanding from 6 months ago that was never fully resolved. Courageous leaders go below the surface, not by assuming they know what's there, but by staying curious enough to ask. They're not here to convict you. I'm here to understand you. And then we can have an honest conversation. That changes everything about how the conversation feels. Employee A is a clear example of going below the surface. Above the surface, the behavior was straightforward. Excessive sick leave use, inconvenient schedulings, the team losing patience. That's what everyone could see. But when I sat down with her with curiosity, asking questions rather than a prepared verdict, I discovered what was below the surface. She wasn't being careless or inconsiderate. She was quietly managing her own health problems while also caring for a partner who was seriously ill. None of her colleagues knew. I didn't know. And I almost walked into that conversation ready to correct behavior I didn't quite understand. So here's a distinction I want to be clear about because it's easy to confuse the two. Gathering background means seeking information that helps you understand the full context. Asking questions, observing patterns, considering what you might be missing. Gossip seeks judgment. It confirms a story you've already written and it builds a case. Think of this as you're gathering the background. Is this helping me understand or helping me feel justified? Understanding moves you towards a courageous conversation. Justification moves you away from one. One more thing before we move into action, and this matters especially for those who lead with heart. Gathering background, approaching someone with curiosity and empathy, understanding their context, none of that means lowering your standards or excusing behavior that needs to change. Empathy and accountability are not opposites. In fact, the most courageous leaders I know hold both at the same time. They say, I understand you're going through something hard, and I still need to talk to you about what's been happening because it matters, because you matter. Consider employee B. Employee B taught me empathy and accountability firsthand. She had remarkable customer service skills, some of the best I had ever seen. Yet she was consistently late, leaving early, adjusting her own schedule without telling anyone. When I met with her, I led with what was working. I adjusted her schedule to address concerns that she raised and extended empathy at every turn. And the behavior continued. What I had to hold on to, what was generally hard to hold on to, was that the empathy for employee B did not mean the rest of my staff could carry her schedule indefinitely. Caring about someone and holding them to a standard are not in conflict. In fact, the most caring thing I could do for employee B was to be honest with her, clearly and consistently, even when the outcome was uncertain. Understanding context doesn't change what needs to be addressed, it changes how you address it. With more precision, more compassion, and a much higher chance of actually being heard. When you have your awareness and your background, you're now ready to act. Awareness tells you what's happening. Background separates what you know from the stories you've been telling yourself. And now it's time to act. But first, I want to say something that stops most people right at this step. Courageous conversations don't require confidence first. Confidence follows action. You act first, the confidence will come. The difference between a courageous conversation that goes well and then what goes sideways often has nothing to do with what happens during the conversation. It has everything to do with what happens before it. So before the conversation, clarify the issue. What is this conversation really about? If you can't name it in one or two clear sentences, keep working until you can. Vague conversations produce vague outcomes. Define the outcome. What does success look like? Not perfect, successful. Are you looking for a behavior change, a mutual understanding? Knowing your intended outcome keeps you anchored when things get uncomfortable. Choose the setting. Private for sensitive issues. Enough time so neither of you feels rushed. Never ambush anyone into a hard conversation. It immediately puts them on the defensive. Opening sets the entire tone for everything that follows. Get it right, and you create safety, a safe environment to be vulnerable. Get it wrong, and the other person spends the rest of the conversation defending themselves instead of engaging with you. A strong opening does three things. State your intentions clearly so the other person knows this is a conversation, not a confrontation. It leads with facts, not judgment, not a story, not an accusation. And it invites dialogue, signaling you are here to understand as much as you can to be understood and to understand. Here's what this can sound like, a good opening. I want to talk to you about something that's been on my mind, and I want to make sure I have the full picture before I draw any conclusions. I've noticed, and you can talk about that specific behavior that you've observed, and I'd like to understand what's been going on from your perspective. Notice that that opening does not include, it doesn't assign motive, it doesn't lead with emotion, and it doesn't put the other person in a position where their only option is to defend themselves. That's not weakness, that's precision. And precision in the opening is one of the most underrated leadership skills there is. Once you're in it, here are 4 principles that will serve you regardless of the situation, the person, or the disc styles involved. Lead with facts. Facts are your anchor. When things get heated, facts can de-escalate. When things get confusing, facts clarify. Return to the facts whenever the conversation starts to drift into blame. Use I statements. I've noticed this happening, and I'm concerned about the impact. Lands very differently than you always do this. I statements keeps you accountable for your own experience without putting the other person on trial. Be curious, not certain. Ask questions. Ask what and how, not why. What's been getting in the way for you? Lands very differently than why haven't you been meeting your deadlines? Stay open to what you are about to hear. and listen to understand, not to respond. We call that active listening. Stay present. Stay quiet longer than feels comfortable. Repeat what you've heard for better understanding. Let the other person fully land before you speak again. This can be where courageous conversations break down and where yours won't. At some point in almost every courageous conversation, emotions will surface. Yours, theirs, both. It's not a sign the conversation is failing. Strong emotions mean the conversation matters. Something real is at stake. Surface level conversations don't produce change. Conversations that touch something really do. When emotions rise, resist the instinct to push through or shut down. Instead, pause. Give the moment some space. Silence is not failure. It can be very powerful. Breathe. It resets your nervous system and keeps your distress response from taking over the conversation. Name the tension if needed. I can see this is bringing up a lot. I want to make sure that we're both fully present. Do we need to take a moment? And if the conversation needs to stop, if emotions have risen to a point where productive dialogue is impossible, it is completely appropriate to pause and reschedule. That's not avoidance, that is wisdom. The difference is that you name a specific time to continue rather than leave it open-ended. Working towards solutions, a courageous conversation isn't finished when the hard thing has been said. It's finished when you've moved towards something together. Collaborate, brainstorm, ask the other person what they think a solution looks like. People will commit far more to a path that they have helped create. Clarify expectations. Make sure you both leave with the same understanding of what was agreed upon and what changes moving forward. And follow up. This is where a lot of conversations fall flat and where I know I did quite often. A courageous conversation is a beginning, not an end. The follow through is what separates a conversation from a commitment. Send a follow up email, set a schedule, a date to meet and go back over and make sure everyone is holding up their ends of the discussion and the bargain. Everything on this slide, including the last slides, the open template, the 4 principles, accountability steps, are all captured in the Courageous Conversations Toolkit. Pull it out when you need it. Courage is a muscle. You don't need to start with the hardest conversations of your life. It gets stronger every time you use it, but yet it gets weaker if you don't. So start small. Practice courage in low stakes moments that show up every day. You get your coffee and it's the wrong combination. Speak up and let them know. You're in a meeting, something doesn't seem quite right. Voice that concern. You've been thinking about a question, and rather than just nodding your head in agreement, ask that question. Advocate for yourself where you've been staying quiet. Every repetition in these small things builds capacity. And that capacity you build in small moments is exactly what you'll draw on when the big conversation finally arrives. Before I leave you with a challenge, I want to be honest to you about something. Everything I shared today, the awareness, the background, the preparation, the opening, the curiosity, the action, I didn't learn any of it easily. I learned most of it by doing it wrong the first time. Let's talk about employee C. What was the outcome there? This is the story I think about when I reflect on what avoidance truly costs. I spoke with her multiple times. I stressed her strengths to the entire team. I managed the tension around her rather than addressing it directly with her. I told myself I was being thoughtful, but I was protecting my own comfort at the expense of her growth. When I left that library for a new position, a new director stepped in and held employee C to the standard I never had. Within a short time, employee C was gone, and she blamed the new director. But the truth is, my silence contributed to that outcome. Had I been honest with her, truly honest, with the kind of clarity that courageous conversations require, she would have had the opportunity to change. or to find her way to a better fit on her own terms. Instead, the choice is made for her. That is the cost of avoidance, not just to you, but to the people you are meant to lead. The outcome of a courageous conversation is never fully in your control, but the choice to show up, that part is under your control. We avoid hard conversations because we're afraid of what might happen. What if they get upset? What if it makes things worse? What if the relationship doesn't survive? Those fears are real. I'm not going to tell you that they aren't. But here's what I also come to know. Avoiding the conversation doesn't make those outcomes less likely. It just delays them and usually makes them worse. Courageous conversations don't guarantee comfort. They don't guarantee that the other person will respond the way you hope. What they do guarantee is this, your integrity. Let's go back to employee A. This is the story that I return to when I remember why this work matters. When I walked into that conversation with curiosity instead of conclusions, something shifted. She told me things she hadn't told her colleagues. We problem solved together. She identified ways to schedule appointments on her days off, to return to work after shorter visits rather than taking full days. We began to accumulate leave again. The tension with our team eased, not because our situation changed, but because understanding changed. That conversation didn't guarantee a perfect outcome. What is guaranteed was that we both showed up honestly, and that honesty produced something neither of us could have reached alone. Earlier, I asked you to think about a conversation you've been avoiding. That conversation is still there. It didn't go anywhere while we were together today. And if you walk out of this without acting, it will still be waiting for you tomorrow, and next week, and next month. But here's what else is true. The longer it waits, the heavier it gets. Avoidance has a cost. It costs you energy. It creates stress. The mental load of carrying something unresolved. It costs you clarity because the longer you sit with a story, the more it grows. And it costs the people around you because when we stay silent about something that matters, we are making a choice on their behalf that isn't ours to make. They deserve the conversation too, not a perfect one, just an honest one. Employee B's story doesn't have the tidy ending I would have written for it. We had the conversation, we made accommodations, we had the conversation again, and ultimately we had to let her go. She was upset. Her colleagues were sad to lose someone they really liked, but yet they were also relieved because the weight of covering for her had been real and had been quietly accumulating for a long time. Here's what I've come to understand about employee B. The most courageous thing I did for her wasn't the accommodation. It was the honesty. Even when the outcome was hard, she was since found a position that she is passionate about, a role where she shows up fully. The conversation I dreaded having with her may have been part of what redirected her towards that. Courageous conversations don't always end the way we hope, but they always move something forward. And sometimes moving forward is exactly what the other person needed, even if neither of you knew it yet. So here's my invitation to you. And I mean this as a genuine challenge, not a polite suggestion. Within the next 72 hours, have one courageous conversation. Not the hardest one of your life, not the conversation you've been dreading for years, just one conversation you've been putting off. One moment where you choose clarity over comfort, honesty over harmony, courage over convenience. Use what you learned today. The courageous conversation model. A, start with awareness. B, do your background. A, take action. Prepare your opening, lead with curiosity, listen to understand. Then take a breath and begin. The toolkit has a 72-hour conversation challenge page, a commitment card you can fill in right now with a conversation you're going to have, when you're going to have it, and how you'll prepare. If you haven't downloaded it yet, we're going to show you how. Courage is not a personality trait that some people are born with and others aren't. It's not reserved for the loudest person in the room or the one with the longest title. Courage is a choice made in ordinary moments by ordinary people and decide that something matters enough to say out loud. You have been making courageous choices your entire life. This is just one more. And you are more than ready to have it. And you are more than ready than you think. So choose courage, not because it's easy, not because it's guaranteed to go well, but because you and the people in your life deserve the kind of leadership that tells the truth. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your openness. And thank you for the courage it takes just to show up and do this kind of work.